Two women fell in love with the same man, completely unaware of each other's feelings, until a shocking discovery at a dinner. What happened next will leave you stunned. Kindly subscribe to this channel to enjoy more of our latest Nollywood movie stories. Frederick was sitting in the living room with his mother, Mrs. Ritta, when she began complaining. "Frederick, when are you going to get married? Your mates are getting married, and here you are, still single. When will I get to see my grandchild?" she asked. Frederick sighed and replied, "Mom, you know I've been in several relationships, but none of them worked out. I'm tired of talking about marriage." Mrs. Ritta frowned. "How long are you going to stay stuck in the past? It's time to move on, son." Frederick, getting irritated, said, "Mom, I'm not ready for marriage. Besides, the good girls are all taken, and the rest are just after money." She shook her head. "Oh, really? Is that what you think? Listen, Frederick, I'm getting older, and I want to see my grandchildren. But no problem. I know what to do." With that, she walked off, leaving Frederick confused. The next day, Frederick went out with his friend John. They were chatting over drinks when John spotted a lady in the distance. He tapped Frederick and said, "Hey, look at that girl behind you." Frederick pretended not to hear. John noticed and said, "Frederick, you've been single for years now. Don't you want to move on and find someone?" Frederick replied sarcastically, "Oh, I see where this is going. Are you married now?" John laughed. "Not yet, but I have a fiancée. We're planning to get married soon. You should find someone too, so we can get married on the same day." Frederick laughed it off, and they changed the topic. The following day, Mrs. Ritta visited a friend's house and met her friend's daughter, Ella, who had just completed her youth service and was looking for a job. Mrs. Ritta instantly liked Ella and started calling her daughter-in-law. While the mothers chatted, Ella excused herself and went inside. When Mrs. Ritta got home, she excitedly told Frederick, "I have good news. I found your wife." Frederick, confused, asked, "What do you mean, Mom? Who did you find a wife for?" "For you, of course," she said, smiling. Frederick got upset. "Mom, I didn't ask you to find me a wife. When I'm ready, I'll do it myself." "When will that be?" she asked. "When I'm gone." Frederick replied, "Mom, you know I can't trust girls these days. Many of them are into hookups." They argued briefly before dropping the topic. The next day, while Frederick was working on his laptop, Mrs. Ritta approached him again. She insisted he give Ella a chance. After much persuasion, Frederick reluctantly agreed to call her. He dialed Ella's number, introduced himself, and awkwardly asked if she was into hookups, inviting her to meet that night. Ella was offended. "Excuse me, I don't do hookups. Don't call me again," she snapped before hanging up. Frederick realized his mother might have been right about Ella. The next day, Frederick's friend John visited him. Frederick shared what his mom had done, hoping for sympathy. Instead, John laughed and said, "Your mom is amazing. At least she's trying to help you since you're not doing it yourself." Frederick frowned. "Are you serious?" "Of course," John said. "Your mom just wants grandkids. She's not getting any younger, you know." Frederick fell silent, lost in thought. After John left, he kept pondering his friend's words. Later, Mrs. Ritta surprised Frederick by bringing Ella to their house. "Frederick, this is my friend's daughter, Ella," she said. Frederick immediately recognized her name and realized what his mom was up to. Still, he exchanged pleasantries with Ella. They chatted briefly before she left. That evening, Ella returned to her friend's house, looking unusually happy. Her friend noticed and asked, "What's making you so excited?" Ella smiled and said, "I met this guy today. He's so cute and kind. His smile is everything. I think I like him." Her friend raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? You just met him, and you already like him? Be careful." Ella laughed and headed upstairs, still smiling. Meanwhile, Frederick sat in his room, wondering if it was finally time to give love another chance. The night was buzzing with music and laughter as Frederick and his friend John attended a lively party. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. John spotted a beautiful lady sitting alone, sipping her drink. He nudged Frederick and said, "Hey, check her out." Frederick glanced briefly but didn't seem interested. John, surprised by his lack of enthusiasm, left it alone. However, Frederick couldn't help but wonder why she was sitting by herself, drinking so much. "Is something bothering her?" he thought. As the party progressed, Frederick noticed the lady was about to pour herself yet another drink. Concerned, he walked over and gently took the glass from her. She tried to grab it back, but Frederick held firm and asked angrily, "What's wrong with you? Are you trying to hurt yourself?" The woman, who was clearly drunk, slurred her words as she replied, "I'm tired. Just tired." "Tired of what?" Frederick asked, softening his tone. "Men," she said bitterly. "They're all the same. They lie, say they love you, and then go cheat." Frederick was taken aback. While listening to her vent, he thought to himself, "Wow, I didn't know some guys could be this heartless. I always thought cheating was mostly done by women. No one is perfect after all." He tried to calm her down and offered to take her home, but she refused. "I'll manage," she said stubbornly. Before leaving, Frederick asked for her contact number to make sure she got home safely. When Frederick got home later that night, he found John waiting for him. Startled, he asked, "How did you get in here?" John grinned. "You gave me your spare key, remember?" "Oh, right," Frederick replied, shaking his head. John then asked, "What took you so long?" Frederick hesitated before saying, "You wouldn't understand, bro. Just know that no one is perfect." John stared at him, confused, as Frederick walked off to his room. The next morning, Frederick was still in bed when his phone rang. He answered groggily, only to hear a woman's voice on the other end. "Hi, it's Sonia, the girl from the party," she said. "Oh, right. I'm so sorry I didn't check on you like I promised," Frederick said apologetically. "It's okay," Sonia replied. "I'm feeling much better now, thanks to you. I don't know what I would have done without you." Frederick smiled. "I'm glad you're okay. Just try to move on and let go of the hurt." "Exactly," Sonia agreed. "By the way, are you free later today? Maybe we could hang out." Caught off guard, Frederick hesitated. He wasn't used to going out with women and wasn't ready to jump into anything. I don't think I'm free today. Maybe some other time," he said politely. "Sure, no problem," Sonia replied, and they ended the call. Later that day, Sonia was chatting with her friend Ella in the living room. While they talked, Ella picked up her phone and called Frederick. As they chatted, Ella couldn't stop smiling, which caught Sonia's attention. "Who are you talking to?" Sonia asked curiously. Ella blushed. "Oh, just this guy my mom's friend introduced me to. He's amazing, kind, caring, and so cute," Sonia teased. "Wow, looks like my friend is getting married soon." They both laughed. 3 days later, after much convincing from Sonia, Frederick agreed to go out with her. They spent the day chatting and getting to know each other. Frederick found himself enjoying her company more than he expected. By the end of the day, they both returned home in good spirits. The next day, Ella surprised Frederick by showing up at his house unannounced. He opened the door, startled to see her. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Seriously? Is that how you welcome your guests? Aren't you happy to see me?" Ella teased. Frederick laughed and invited her in. She handed him a plate of food she had prepared. "You made this?" he asked, surprised. "Of course," Ella said proudly. They sat down, ate together, and had a good time before Ella left. Over the next month, both Sonia and Ella became more involved in Frederick's life, but neither of them knew they were falling for the same man. One evening, Sonia invited Frederick over for dinner and mentioned it to Ella. Excited, Ella was eager to meet the guy her friend had been praising. When Frederick arrived, Sonia welcomed him warmly. Just as she was about to ask him to sit, Ella walked into the room. Both women froze in shock. Ella broke the silence. "Frederick? What are you doing here? You told me you wouldn't be available today." Hearing Ella call Frederick by name, Sonia looked confused. "Wait, how do you know him?" Frederick, stunned by the situation, finally said, "Wow, what a small world." Without another word, he walked out, leaving both women confused and angry. Sonia and Ella immediately got into an argument, each refusing to give Frederick up. When Frederick got home, he was visibly upset, pacing back and forth. John, who was sitting in the living room, watched him quietly. "What's going on?" John finally asked. Frederick didn't answer at first, but after some prodding, he sat down and explained everything. John listened intently, nodding as Frederick poured his heart out. John then asked, "Frederick, are you even ready to get married?" Frederick took a deep breath and replied, "Yes, I am." "Then which one of them do you like the most?" John asked. Frederick looked even more confused. "I don't know, John. They're both amazing, and I'm just so confused right now." John shook his head. "You can't be confused forever. You have to decide." Frederick sighed and said he needed some rest. He went upstairs to take a nap, leaving John deep in thought. The next day, Frederick called John over, saying he needed to discuss something important. When John arrived, Frederick shared his dilemma. "John, I really don't know who to choose. They're both everything I've prayed for in a woman. I can't just let either of them go." John, surprised by Frederick's indecision, said, "You need to think about this carefully, bro. You can't keep them both hanging." Feeling frustrated, John left the house. Later that day, Sonia called Ella into the living room. She sat her friend down and said, "Look, we can't keep fighting over a guy. This isn't healthy. We need to settle this." Ella raised an eyebrow. "So what do you suggest?" Sonia continued, "Let's go to Frederick's house together. We'll ask him to decide who he really wants to be with." Ella thought about it and smiled. "That's actually a good idea." The next morning, both women showed up at Frederick's door. When Frederick opened it, he was shocked to see them standing there together. "Come in," he said hesitantly, leading them to the living room. Once seated, Ella spoke up. "Frederick, we both like you, and we've agreed that you need to make a choice. That's why we're here." Frederick, caught off guard, took a deep breath and replied, "I really like both of you, but I'm so confused. I need more time to figure this out." The women agreed to give him some time and left, leaving Frederick feeling the weight of his decision. Later that evening, John came over again. Seeing Frederick still stressed, he offered some advice. "Look, instead of stressing over this, spend more time with each of them. Get to know them better. See how you feel when you're with each of them." Frederick nodded slowly. "You think that'll work?" "Trust me," John said. "Just follow your heart." Over the next 2 weeks, Frederick spent quality time with both Sonia and Ella. He realized that while he cared deeply for both women, Ella's calm nature and caring personality stood out to him. She made him feel at peace. Frederick knew he couldn't be with both of them, and it was time to make a decision. One evening, Frederick called John and told him, "I've made my decision. I'm choosing Ella. I feel something real for her." John was thrilled for his friend. "Congratulations, bro. I knew you'd figure it out," he said, teasing Frederick as they laughed together. The next day, Frederick invited Sonia to his house. Gently, he explained his feelings. "Sonia, I truly value you and the connection we have, but my heart belongs to Ella. I hope we can still be friends." Though disappointed, Sonia smiled and said, "I understand. Thank you for being honest." She congratulated him and left, wishing him the best. Later that evening, Frederick visited Ella. Nervous but determined, he confessed his feelings to her. "Ella, I've thought about this a lot, and I realize I really care about you. I want to be with you." Ella, who had been waiting to hear these words, was overjoyed. She hugged him tightly and said, "I've been hoping you'd say that." As they held each other, Frederick smiled, feeling a sense of peace and excitement for the new chapter in his life. It was the beginning of a love story filled with hope and happiness. I'm sure you enjoyed this interesting Nollywood movie story. Kindly subscribe to this channel to get more of our latest Nollywood movie stories.